Hello brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man channel. Some souls don't break. They disintegrate quietly while the world thinks they're unshakable. That's the paradox of the Sigma male, the man everyone assumes is untouchable, unbreakable, and mentally bulletproof. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The quieter the man, the deeper the fracture when someone finally hits the right pressure point. And according to behavioral psychology, the people who appear the most self-contained are often the ones who suffer the most invisible damage, because nobody thinks they can be hurt. A Sigma doesn't crumble with noise, he crumbles with precision. He doesn't explode, he implodes. And the terrifying thing is, most people don't even notice when it starts happening. They mistake his silence for strength, his withdrawal for just how he is, and his emotional shutdown for peace. Meanwhile, the man is basically running a silent system crash in the background, and still somehow pretending the updates are installing normally. This is the warning people ignore, because crushing a Sigma male's soul isn't done with dramatic battles or emotional warfare. It happens through subtle hits, surgical pressure, and the kind of psychological missteps that turn his inner world from a fortress into a fault line. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't cliché, it isn't predictable, and it definitely isn't the romanticized, strong, silent type nonsense. This is the real anatomy of how a Sigma male breaks, and why you should never, ever push him there. Number 1. Turn his loyalty into a leash. A Sigma male doesn't give his loyalty lightly. It isn't casual or performative. It's quiet, deliberate, and often invisible to anyone who doesn't earn it. When he invests in someone or something, it's because he has measured the cost, weighed the risk, and decided it aligns with his principles. His loyalty is not a card he plays to earn approval. It's a part of his identity, a reflection of his internal code. So when that loyalty is manipulated, twisted, or exploited, it doesn't just hurt, it shakes him at the core. The way to crush him in this arena isn't through confrontation or shouting. It's far more subtle. It's taking what he gives freely and turning it into an obligation, a tether, a chain, asking for more than he's willing to give, guilting him for boundaries he never agreed to, or treating his commitment as a tool for control, is like eroding the foundation of a building brick by brick. He notices when someone treats his loyalty as a given, and it slowly chips away at the pride and trust he has in himself. He begins questioning whether giving so much of himself is a strength or a mistake. This isn't about breaking him through cruelty. It's about warping the very thing that defines him. Sigma males are fiercely protective of their personal values and the energy they dedicate. When loyalty is weaponized against them, they feel trapped between honoring their own principles and being manipulated into someone else's expectations. The sense of betrayal is amplified not because the act is grand or dramatic, but because it's personal, silent, and almost invisible. It's the slow, insidious realization that something sacred he offered without hesitation has been used to bind him, rather than respected. Once that happens, a Sigma male retreats inward. He becomes distant, detached, and almost unreadable. The same loyalty that once defined him transforms into suspicion. Every connection is measured, every commitment questioned, and every act of trust becomes a calculated risk. Turning his loyalty into a leash doesn't just hurt him temporarily, it corrupts the very framework that allows him to connect, invest, and operate with integrity. It's a surgical strike to the heart of who he is. Number 2, strip away his purpose with meaningless obligations. A Sigma male thrives on purpose. Everything he does, every decision he makes, is measured against an internal standard that he alone understands. His life isn't a series of random actions. It's a deliberate path guided by personal missions, goals, and principles. When those things are stripped away, replaced with trivial or meaningless obligations, The effect is devastating. It isn't loud or obvious, but it erodes him from the inside out. The danger comes when the tasks, responsibilities, or expectations forced upon him are devoid of significance. Repetitive errands, unnecessary meetings, constant interruptions, and pointless approvals slowly sap the energy he reserves for what truly matters. Over time, the things he values begin to feel overshadowed by a constant, grinding sense of obligation. What was once a life built around intent becomes a life dictated by noise and insignificance. Every small demand chips away at his focus and patience, making the world feel heavy and confining instead of expansive and aligned. The Sigma's frustration doesn't come from being busy. It comes from being busy with the wrong things. He can handle complexity, chaos, and even pressure, but he cannot endure a life where effort is divorced from meaning. Once purpose is replaced with arbitrary duties, he starts questioning not just the tasks themselves, but the point of his own engagement. His internal compass, which rarely wavers, begins to spin aimlessly. The inner drive that fuels his confidence, independence, and ingenuity is replaced with fatigue, apathy, and the creeping feeling that his energy is being squandered. This is why stripping a Sigma male of purpose is so destructive. It doesn't just slow him down or irritate him temporarily. It fundamentally attacks the engine that powers his existence. When his mission feels meaningless, even the strongest Sigma begins to retreat, disconnecting from the world that imposes these hollow demands. His actions become mechanical, his presence distant, and his brilliance buried under the weight of obligations that hold no value. Purpose isn't just motivation for him, it's oxygen. Take that away, and you don't just frustrate him, you suffocate the very part of his soul that keeps him alive, sharp and unstoppable. Number 3, punish him for being self-contained. A Sigma male's independence isn't a quirk. It's the foundation of who he is. He doesn't need constant approval, endless validation, or permission to exist on his own terms. His solitude isn't loneliness. It's a space where he processes, plans, and sharpens himself. But the moment someone treats that self-containment as a flaw, as emotional coldness, or as avoidance, the effect is quietly devastating. It doesn't hit like a sudden storm. It seeps in, undermining the very essence of his identity. When a Sigma is shamed for needing space, criticized for keeping his thoughts private, or pressured to perform emotional labor he hasn't agreed to, it distorts his natural rhythm. The things that sustain him, reflection, autonomy, and controlled interaction, become guilt traps. Every time he steps back to recharge, he feels a subtle sting, as though his choice to be self-reliant is being punished. The independence that once empowered him now starts to feel like a burden or a liability. This is far more corrosive than direct attacks, because it attacks the rules he plays by. A Sigma doesn't operate in chaos for chaos's sake. He measures, calculates, and chooses when to engage. When someone constantly tells him that his chosen way of being is wrong or insufficient, he begins doubting himself. His internal compass, which rarely wavers, starts to wobble. The quiet pride he takes in being self-contained, in being someone who doesn't rely on others for validation, transforms into a shadow of anxiety and second-guessing. Punishing a Sigma for being self-contained doesn't just frustrate him. It erodes trust, not in others, but in his own judgment. He starts questioning whether his instincts, his boundaries, and even his sense of freedom are mistakes. Over time, this creates a retreat not just from specific people, but from connection itself. The soul of a Sigma male is built on the freedom to operate alone. Take that autonomy and criticize it, and you're not just annoying him. You're dismantling the core of his identity, one subtle, punishing moment at a time. Number 4, rob him of the ability to disappear. For a Sigma male, the ability to walk away is more than a choice. It's a lifeline. It's what allows him to protect his energy, maintain clarity, and preserve the part of himself that the world cannot touch. He doesn't leave out of fear or avoidance. He leaves to maintain control over his own existence. When someone takes that away, when they trap him emotionally, socially, or psychologically, it's not just inconvenient, it's suffocating. The subtlety of this attack makes it even more devastating. It's not about locking doors or forcing his hand in a literal sense. It's about creating invisible chains, obligations that can't be ignored, guilt that refuses to let him detach, constant pressures that pull him back into the orbit of other people's demands. When a Sigma feels he can't step away, the tension grows internally, quietly consuming the mental freedom that he relies on to navigate life. Every interaction, every expectation becomes a weight pressing down on the part of him that needs space to breathe. Sigma males are built on discretion and autonomy. They operate with a sense of purpose that requires freedom, freedom to leave, freedom to pause, freedom to withdraw entirely. Remove that, and you remove the buffer between him and the chaos of the world. He can no longer regulate his energy, his thoughts, or his emotions on his own terms. Instead of moving with intention, he becomes reactive, constrained, and frustrated. The inner balance he depends on starts to fracture. This isn't about forcing vulnerability. It's about undermining the very system that keeps him strong. A Sigma's calm, detached exterior doesn't mean he can't be cornered. When his ability to disappear is stripped away, he begins to feel trapped in ways that others rarely notice until it's too late. The autonomy that once defined him, his freedom to choose when and how to engage, is replaced with a sense of captivity. And once that happens, the quiet confidence, the strategic detachment, and the serene control that make him Sigma are replaced by agitation, withdrawal, and the creeping realization that even his solitude has been stolen. Number 5, invalidate the depth behind his actions. A Sigma male doesn't operate on surface-level thinking. Every action, every choice, every word often carries layers of intention and meaning that most people don't even notice. When someone responds only to what he does rather than why he does it, the effect is quietly destructive. It doesn't feel like an attack at first, but over time, it corrodes the very foundation of how he sees himself and interacts with the world. Sigma males measure themselves against internal standards. They act deliberately, often in ways that are invisible or misunderstood by others. When their efforts, sacrifices, or calculated moves are met with indifference, misinterpretation, or outright dismissal, it strips away the validation that matters most to them. Not the shallow approval from the crowd, but recognition of the intelligence, strategy, and intention behind their choices. When that recognition is denied, the sense of invisibility grows. It's not just frustration, it's an existential strain. The subtle cruelty of invalidating a Sigma's depth lies in its quiet precision. Criticizing a Sigma male for what appears on the surface without acknowledging the reasoning behind it forces him into a world where effort is invisible and thought is irrelevant. Over time, this breeds doubt. He begins to question whether his actions carry any weight, whether the careful consideration he invests is wasted, and whether the very part of him that distinguishes him from the noise is meaningless. The internal dialogue that once reinforced his identity becomes a mirror of doubt. This erosion doesn't just affect his confidence, it reshapes how he engages with the world. He withdraws, retreats, and limits the layers he reveals, fearing that the complexity he values will always be overlooked or misjudged. The depth that once made him formidable becomes a liability in a world that refuses to see it. Invalidation doesn't just ignore him, It teaches him that his precision, strategy, and intentionality are useless. It's one of the quietest but most effective ways to dismantle a Sigma male from the inside, turning his brilliance into a silent, unreadable shadow of what it could be. Number 6. Reduce him to a role in someone else's story. A Sigma male lives by his own rules and follows his own path. He doesn't exist to fit into other people's narratives, and he refuses to perform according to someone else's expectations. Every move he makes, every choice he takes, is tied to his personal mission, not the applause or judgment of others. When someone drags him into their story, imposes a role on him, or forces him to play a character he never chose, it strikes at the core of his identity. It's subtle, almost invisible to outsiders, but for a Sigma male, it feels like a violation of his very essence. The danger lies in the fact that he doesn't react loudly. He doesn't storm off or make a scene. Instead, he internalizes it. When reduced to a supporting role in someone else's drama, his autonomy erodes slowly. The world begins to feel like a stage where he's expected to perform, follow scripts, and respond to cues that aren't his own. The independence that once defined him starts to feel compromised. What was once deliberate action becomes reactive compliance, and the satisfaction of living life on his own terms fades into a quiet resentment. Sigma males pride themselves on self-direction. They measure success, loyalty, and engagement according to personal standards, not external expectations. Forcing him into someone else's narrative strips that away. It makes him question his decisions, second-guess his motives, and reevaluate the freedom he's always protected. Every time he bends to a role that isn't his, a part of his inner alignment fractures. This kind of soul-crushing influence doesn't need overt conflict. It's the small, insidious moments where his actions are reframed to serve someone else's story, where his intentions are ignored, and where his presence is treated as a supporting act rather than a protagonist in his own life. Over time, the Sigma male retreats, distancing himself emotionally and mentally. His brilliance, his independence, and the subtle power he wields begin to fade quietly, leaving only a shadow performing in a story that was never his to begin with. Number 7. Make him feel replaceable. A Sigma male's sense of self-worth isn't built on attention or validation from the crowd. He thrives on the understanding that his presence, his energy, and his contributions carry weight because they are rare, not because they're abundant. When someone treats him as replaceable, it doesn't just bruise his ego. It pierces the core of his identity. The subtle cruelty of making a Sigma feel like just another person is devastating because it undermines the uniqueness that he guards fiercely. The impact is gradual but relentless. Every time his efforts are ignored, every time his absence is unnoticed, and every time someone treats his presence as optional, a Sigma begins to internalize a quiet doubt. He wonders if the energy he invests, the thought he applies, and the boundaries he maintains actually matter. That internal compass, which has always guided him with precision, starts wobbling. The rare sense of invulnerability he carries begins to fade, replaced with the hollow sensation that perhaps he isn't as indispensable as he once believed. This is not about dramatic gestures or overt insults. It's about the micro moments that convey indifference, replacing his input with someone else's, overlooking his unique perspective, or casually assuming anyone could do what he does chips away at his confidence like invisible termites. For a Sigma who values depth, autonomy, and impact over superficial recognition, being made to feel replaceable is a silent annihilation. The fallout isn't immediate. At first he compensates, works harder, or withdraws slightly, recalibrating his approach. But over time, repeated disregard corrodes the part of him that feels rare, exceptional, and untouchable. His interactions become measured, his trust becomes scarce, and the openness that once defined his presence dwindles. When a Sigma male feels replaceable, he doesn't just retreat socially, he retreats into himself, hiding the brilliance, independence, and subtle power that made him extraordinary. The quiet realization that his rarity is unrecognized strikes deeper than any insult, leaving an emptiness where confidence, purpose, and fire once lived. Number 8. Undermine his self-reliance with forced dependence. A Sigma male's independence is not a habit, it's a lifeline. He measures the world through his own lens, solves problems on his own terms, and prides himself on the fact that he doesn't need anyone to prop him up. His strength comes from knowing he can navigate life alone, make decisions without interference, and create solutions that fit his vision. When someone undermines that by forcing dependence, even subtly, it attacks him at the core. This isn't about asking for help once or sharing a burden. It's about creating a dynamic where he feels obligated to rely on others for things he used to handle himself. It can start small, taking over tasks he could manage, insisting on providing solutions for him, or framing assistance as help when he never asked for it. Each act chips away at his autonomy. Suddenly, his self-reliance, which once fueled his confidence, begins to feel like a weakness rather than a strength. The Sigma male notices this erosion immediately, even if he doesn't confront it. He starts questioning why he can't handle situations the way he always has, why his competence is being overshadowed by someone else's insistence on control, and whether the independence he values is being dismissed. This internal conflict gnaws at him quietly, producing frustration, doubt, and even resentment. The subtlety of this attack is what makes it so effective. It doesn't provoke him into open anger or defiance. It creeps into his sense of self without dramatic confrontation. Over time, he may begin doubting his instincts, questioning his abilities, or reluctantly leaning on others in ways that feel unnatural. What was once his defining edge, his ability to operate alone, becomes compromised, leaving a shadow of hesitation and uncertainty where confidence once lived. For a Sigma male, being forced into dependence isn't just inconvenient. It's a direct strike at the foundation of his identity. Undermine his self-reliance, and you don't just frustrate him, you destabilize the part of him that defines who he is, eroding the quiet power and freedom that make him truly untouchable. Number 9. Expose his private motives publicly. A Sigma male operates from a private internal world. His decisions, strategies, and actions are rarely performative. They are guided by principles, observation, and long-term thinking that most people don't even notice. This inner life is sacred to him. When someone exposes his motives to others without his consent, it doesn't just embarrass him, it violates the very architecture of how he operates. It's a direct strike at the trust he places in himself and in the privacy of his own mind. Sigma males are meticulous about control. They measure who sees what and when, and they reveal only what aligns with their purpose. Publicly revealing his motives twists that control into vulnerability. Suddenly, the careful calculation that underpins his choices is distorted into a story for others to judge, critique, or manipulate. The inner world he has built becomes a spectacle, and the sense of power that comes from quietly steering his life vanishes. The damage isn't always immediate, but it's relentless. Once exposed, his trust fractures, not just toward the person who shared his motives, but toward the broader environment he once moved through confidently. He begins to question whether his discretion was a strength or a mistake. Every interaction carries the shadow of potential exposure, creating tension and hesitation in moments where he used to act decisively. This exposure doesn't just affect perception, it corrodes self-perception. Sigma males value the alignment between their internal logic and external action. When that alignment is compromised, even subtly, The sense of self that has always guided him starts to wobble. Actions that once felt purposeful now feel vulnerable. Intentions that were once invisible and untouchable are suddenly subject to scrutiny, judgment, or misinterpretation. Exposing a Sigma male's motives publicly isn't dramatic, it's surgical. It attacks his control, his confidence, and his sanctuary of privacy all at once. It doesn't just embarrass him, it destabilizes the quiet, self-contained world that allows him to operate with calm precision. Once that foundation is shaken, he withdraws, recalibrates, and guards himself in ways that make him simultaneously more distant and more untouchable, leaving a silence heavier than any confrontation could create. Number 10. Turn admiration into silent competition. Sigma males are not motivated by praise or recognition in the traditional sense. They operate on personal standards, internal metrics, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they are aligned with their own principles. When someone admires them, it can feel validating, but the admiration only works positively if it's genuine and unconditional. The moment admiration is twisted into competition, the effect is destabilizing. It quietly undermines the Sigma's confidence and erodes the authenticity of his self-perception. Turning admiration into silent competition doesn't require overt challenges or confrontations. It happens subtly. Someone praises him in public but privately works to outdo him. Someone acknowledges his achievements while simultaneously suggesting he's not the best, or someone mirrors his actions just to match or surpass them. Sigma males are highly attuned to authenticity, and when admiration feels performative or competitive, it becomes a source of tension rather than respect. Every compliment or recognition that carries an unspoken contest chips away at the ease and assurance he usually carries. The danger of this lies in the internal conflict it creates. Sigma males are not naturally reactive, they internalize. When admiration turns competitive, he begins to question whether his accomplishments hold value, or if they're just another benchmark in someone else's game. His focus, which normally flows toward personal mastery, is redirected toward perception management and comparison. He starts to doubt the uniqueness of his actions and the significance of his independent achievements. Over time, this silent competition breeds subtle resentment and guardedness. The admiration that once fueled connection and respect becomes a pressure point, forcing him to measure himself not by his own standards, but against the subtle challenges masked as praise. The Sigma male's natural detachment and self-sufficiency are tested as he becomes increasingly protective of his autonomy and inner satisfaction. Twisting admiration into competition doesn't just irritate him, it corrodes the trust he places in others' intentions and sows a quiet dissonance between how he sees himself and how he is perceived. The process is silent, invisible to most, but the impact is profound. It transforms respect into suspicion, validation into tension, and admiration into a quiet battlefield where the Sigma male must constantly defend the integrity of his own identity. Number 11, rewrite his integrity. A Sigma. Male's integrity is the backbone of his identity. He doesn't follow rules blindly or perform morality for appearances. His principles are chosen carefully, lived intentionally, and defended quietly. When someone forces him to question that integrity, it doesn't just frustrate him, it shakes the very foundation of who he is. Rewriting his integrity isn't about accusing him of wrongdoing. It's about making him doubt whether his moral compass is strength or liability, right or flawed, admired or pitied. The process can be subtle. It might come in the form of constant criticism for decisions he believed were principled, pressure to bend rules he respects, or attempts to frame his actions as morally questionable or outdated. Each challenge chips away at his confidence, not in his intelligence, but in the alignment between his values and the world around him. What was once a solid, unshakable sense of self becomes a space of internal debate, hesitation, and subtle self-doubt. Sigma males are internal judges of character, both in themselves and others. When someone manipulates that internal system, it produces dissonance. He begins asking questions he never needed to ask. Was he wrong to act the way he did? Were his intentions selfish or misguided? Could he trust his own judgment? These questions, once foreign to him, start to creep into his thoughts. His clarity and quiet confidence erode under the weight of uncertainty, and even decisions he made with certainty begin to feel unstable. The danger of rewriting his integrity is that it doesn't provoke immediate resistance. Sigma males rarely react with anger. They process, analyze, and adjust internally. The attack works by turning their own strength against them, creating hesitation where there was decisiveness, doubt where there was clarity, and tension where there was alignment. Once his integrity is questioned enough, he may withdraw, retreat, or become guarded, protecting the pieces of himself that feel most vulnerable. His calm, strategic, and self-contained demeanor begins to fracture, leaving an internal landscape full of uncertainty. For a Sigma male, nothing cuts deeper than this silent erosion, because integrity is not just what he does, it's who he is. And when that is rewritten, the man himself feels altered, diminished, and unmoored. Number 12, force him into performative leadership. A Sigma male can lead, but only on his own terms. Leadership for him is not a role to be worn for approval or to satisfy someone else's expectations. It's a responsibility chosen when necessary, executed with quiet precision, and guided by his own judgment. Forcing him into performative leadership, where he is expected to act, speak, or make decisions according to someone else's rules, is a slow, invisible way to crush his spirit. It strips away the autonomy he values more than authority itself. The attack is subtle but effective. It happens when others expect him to take charge in social, professional, or emotional situations, not because he chose to, but because they insist he must. Every directive, expectation, or pressure to perform publicly becomes a weight on his independence. The very quality that makes him calm, strategic, and self-sufficient, his choice to lead only when necessary, is twisted into a trap that forces action out of obligation rather than alignment. Sigma males are not motivated by applause, recognition, or validation. Their strength comes from operating according to their own internal standards, unshaken by the noise of external demands. When leadership is imposed as a performance, he experiences it as dissonance between his internal logic and the world's expectations. The confidence that once radiated from his measured decisions begins to waver, replaced with subtle frustration, hesitation, and detachment. He may execute tasks competently, but internally, the sense of control, freedom, and satisfaction he normally derives from leadership is replaced with resentment. Over time, performative leadership erodes his engagement. He may withdraw from interactions, limit his contributions, or disengage completely to protect the autonomy he holds sacred. The Sigma male's leadership is defined by choice, not obligation, and taking that choice away attacks the very mechanism that makes him effective, respected, and unshakable, by forcing him into roles he never chose. The quiet power, strategic calm, and natural authority that define him are replaced with tension, internal conflict, and a withdrawal that is invisible but profoundly destabilizing. The more he is pushed, the more he retreats inward, leaving a shell of compliance where once there was decisive, independent influence. Crushing a Sigma male's soul isn't about dramatic confrontations or obvious attacks. It's about precision, subtlety, and understanding the delicate architecture of a mind built on independence, strategy, and self-mastery. Every weakness exploited, every boundary manipulated, and every principal question chips away quietly at the foundation that allows him to operate with calm authority and unmatched clarity. From turning his loyalty into a leash to stripping away his purpose, from punishing him for being self-contained to making him feel replaceable. The ways to destabilize him are as psychological as they are invisible. The Sigma male's power doesn't lie in showy dominance. It lies in control over himself, in the quiet mastery of his thoughts, and in the freedom to navigate life without unnecessary interference. Attack that, and you don't just hurt him. You unmoor the very essence that makes him untouchable. But there's a deeper lesson here, one that goes beyond the idea of manipulation or control. Understanding these points doesn't make someone invincible to others. It makes them aware of how fragile the mind of someone who appears so unshakable can truly be. Sigma males thrive in solitude, guard their integrity fiercely, and operate with an inner logic that most cannot comprehend. When that logic is violated, it isn't the visible cracks that matter. It's the silent erosion of trust, purpose, and autonomy that devastates from the inside out. And that's what makes the Sigma male simultaneously enigmatic, formidable, and deeply human. If this deep dive into the psychology and vulnerabilities of Sigma males captivated you, intrigued you, or even shook your understanding of human behavior, don't let the insight stop here. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to uncover more hidden truths. Comment your thoughts and experiences to join the conversation, and share this with friends who need to see the extraordinary depth behind the silent power of Sigma males. Every insight, every discussion, and every share brings us closer to understanding the minds that walk through the world quietly, strategically, and unconquered. Dive in, stay sharp, and never underestimate the complexity hidden behind calm, deliberate independence.